Hey, everybody. Fascinating discussion today, diving into the world of bone health with bone health technologies, addressing the decline in bone strength and bone density in men and women with bone health. Laura, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Evan.
Hi,
I,
Laura.
Well, thanks for being here with Irma and I at Avira Health. Really interesting technology and story behind your wearable technology, OsteoBooth. Maybe give us an introduction to yourself and the
sure.
big idea, the mission behind bone health.
Yeah. So my name is Laura Yeeses. I'm the CEO of Bone Health Technologies. I've been with the company just about 4 years. So I joined when we were in the process of running our pivotal trial. My background is I spent about 25 years in tech, so enterprise software, but I also led some major brands like Netscape and Yahoo and ran marketing at Checkpoint, was CEO of two startups, SugarSync and Catch. Catch was acquired by Apple. And then after that, I saw this convergence of health and technologies that I found very exciting. And that's what I've been doing the last 8 years. And when I was approached to join Bone Health Technologies, I was just immediately very excited because I grew up in a family of doctors. I actually worked in a nursing home when I was in college during the summers.
Mm.
And I pretty much end up in a nursing home for one of two reasons. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but Alzheimer's or you break your hip. And my grandmother had osteoporosis. I have osteopenia. It's just such a common problem, and we really lack solutions. And my really my only question to the founders was, why should I believe this thing's going to work? Because if this works, we can really impact a lot of people. And at that time, we weren't sure. We had some good scientific background behind us. So there was a body of evidence from NASA on whole body vibration. And Bone Health Technologies had done a proof of concept study, a small study that had some very promising data. But it seemed such an important opportunity, such a big opportunity that was like, well, there's some good scientific principles. And we're going to know the answer to this in a couple of years after we do the pivotal trial. And so fast forward, we saw the results from the trial in November of 22, and they were really outstanding. We reduced the loss of bone strength and bone density by well over 80%. And we went on to apply to the FDA for approval, and that was granted in January of 24. And so let me just kind of give you a little bit of perspective on this approval. It's a de novo. We are a breakthrough device. So FDA granted us breakthrough status because we are working on, an area of such unmet need. De novo means that you are really creating a new type of device. So there have been 16 orthopedic de novos in the history of the FDA. These are not easy to achieve. So that was very exciting. And then, it's the first and only prescription treatment for bone strength and bone density that's not a pharmacological product. So, let me kind of switch gears to talking about, I've mentioned a few times how big the problem is and the unmet need, and maybe I'll just, give some more perspective on that.
Please.
Loss of bone density is part of aging. So, this is exactly the right chart, right? So you see that very steep decline for women. This is occurring during menopause. So the loss of estrogen leads to a rapid loss of bone. And then we continue to lose bone. And so half of all women will have a fracture in their lifetime. Most women will eventually get osteoporosis. It's one of these when, not ifs. And this is for average bone density. So the peak bone mass is achieved in your 30s. Well, what if you don't achieve peak bone mass? What if you had poor nutrition, or you had to take a lot of steroids for bad asthma, or you had undiagnosed celiac? Then this curve is even lower, and the bone loss therefore hits the danger zone earlier. The other thing that's interesting is that, osteopenia is more common than osteoporosis, kind of like prediabetes to diabetes. 50 million Americans roughly with osteopenia, another 12 million with osteoporosis. But even though osteoporosis has a higher hip fracture risk, so 8 times normal or higher risk of fracture, there's so many patients with osteopenia that there's actually more fractures in the osteopenic population. So, this is a very big problem. And we really don't have any treatments for osteopenia other than lifestyle. So if you have osteopenia or you're at risk, of course, you want to optimize your nutrition, get enough calcium, get enough protein, get weight-bearing exercise. But most women will still lose bone, right? Even if you're optimizing on all of those fronts. And then, of course, not everyone can even do all those exercises. So we really need something else. There are medications for osteoporosis, but generally speaking, they're indicated once you have osteoporosis, not osteopenia. So what we don't have is the equivalent of like a statin or metformin, or where you start early to slow the progression and take that medicine essentially indefinitely, right? If you have high cholesterol in your 40s, you're probably taking a statin until you die. We don't have anything like that for osteoporosis, right? The first line medications, bisphosphonates, typically are used for 5 years, and then you need a drug holiday, maybe 10. There's this big unmet need, and we saw an opportunity to try to take a novel approach.
Oh, that's
wow.
Such a fascinating foray into the reasons behind your company and the huge unmet needs. So let's dive into your actual product and what it is and how it works and how it's different from other treatments, or tries to address this condition maybe in ways other conditions are addressed early on.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned weight-bearing exercise, that's one of the guidances for patients with at risk of fracture, low bone density, to get weight-bearing exercise. So we know weight-bearing exercise is important because it provides natural stimulation to the bones. Bones are like muscles, use it or lose it, right? You stimulate them, that gets them to increase their cell turnover and density. So there's a body of evidence on using whole body vibration, and a lot of that research was done by NASA and a scientist named Clint Rubin. So astronauts lose about 2% of their bone density per month because they're not stimulating their bones, zero gravity. Postmenopausal women are losing 2 to 3% per year. So this was an urgent problem for astronauts. And NASA studied use of whole body vibration platforms, and they were effective for astronauts. And there are also further studies showing that whole body vibration platforms that are specifically designed and calibrated improve bone density in postmenopausal women. However, the very good whole body vibration platforms are quite expensive, but more importantly, the compliance has typically been low, right? You have to stand there, you're not doing anything. Unless you're holding your knees perfectly straight, your knees are shock absorbers, it absorbs the vibration. And then frankly, we're mostly vibrating our feet and lower legs, where the most serious fractures are hips and lumbar spine. So that being said, there's good science behind them, but we had the idea of improving upon this research from a more practical and innovation standpoint. Our founder and inventor, Dr. Shay Mangrum, is a physical medicine and pain doctor. He was seeing all these patients with vertebral compression fractures. By the way, when we talk about little old ladies, or we see that hunch kind of kyphotic posture, that's typically from vertebral compression fractures, right? They didn't start little, they became little, or they became little, right? And the front of the vertebrae collapses from, weakness. And that's what leads to this hunched over position. So, as you can imagine, it's very painful. And he didn't have a lot of solutions or treatments to offer his patients. He read up on the whole body vibration and had the idea of putting this vibration in a belt. Well, a belt does two important things. The first is that the vibration is applied to the hips and lumbar spine, and those are the most vulnerable and most important fracture sites. So hip fractures are deadly. Vertebral compression fractures are very, very painful and debilitating.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really putting the treatment right where you need it and applying the vibration locally. The other thing is, because it's a belt, we consider it a wearable. You can wear it while you're doing other things. So in the pivotal trial, we asked patients, when did you use the belt? How did you use it? And it was, walking the dog, doing dishes, cooking, brushing my teeth in the morning. So they could incorporate it into their daily life. And this led to greater compliance. And in fact, we saw in the study that those who used it 3 times a week or more throughout the year, they were the ones that had this greater than 80% reduction in the loss of bone density. But we did see even a better effect for those who used it 4 and 5 times per week, as you would expect. And, treatments only work if you use them. So, we're not anti-whole body vibration platforms. I think some of the many, they've done a lot of innovation and research that we've built upon, but we really want to take this and put it in a form that can get to tens of millions of patients, which is how many people need something like this.
Wow. What really, really amazing work. And what's the response been like in terms of feedback from users or healthcare providers, physicians, friends, family? Maybe I'm guessing you have a few of those too. Tell us more.
So it's been really gratifying. We've been working very, very hard for several years, and trials take a long time, and the FDA process. But it's been worth it. We announced the FDA approval in January. And since then, we've had over 10,000 patients, mostly patients, but also physicians and other healthcare providers on our waiting list. We just did a webinar for patients, and I think we had 1,700 patients sign up to listen in. The most amazing thing is during the webinar, there were over 650 questions in the chat.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
People are really excited. Before we announced, there are a number of groups on Facebook, osteoporosis education, osteoporosis exercise, just, as you'd expect for many diseases. And there's this one post someone wrote is, when is someone going to do something new or try something new or reimagine? Because the field has become kind of dead, right? There's no new drugs in late stage clinical trial. There's only 2 companies with branded drugs, Amgen and Radius. Everything else is generic. Big pharma, with the exception of Amgen, who I guess is big pharma, Radius is a relatively smaller pharma company, has abandoned this field. And I don't know if it's that they just think that old ladies, it's okay that they get frail and fracture, or that it's too hard, or the FDA sets the bar too high, the studies are too expensive. I'm not sure exactly why, but as a result, there's really this hunger for something new, something non-pharmacological, something that has proven efficacy. And so we've been very gratified by the response. So now we're just working really hard to get the devices ready for the market. We've also recently acquired an osteoporosis exercise company called Wellen, and we are incorporating that into our solution. We have a companion app that goes with the belt. It also provides education, helps patients track their use of the device, calcium consumption, nutrition, and now we'll also give them exercise guidance that is customized for their diagnosis and their level of fitness.
That is very, very exciting. And isn't it interesting how women have traditionally been underrepresented in clinical trials for all kinds of drugs and devices? And it's so disheartening to see that such a huge numbers of people who will suffer from these preventable conditions related to osteopenia, osteoporosis are not really being served by traditional pharma or even med device companies. So it looks like you want to respond to that.
Here's an interesting statistic. In the last 50 years, we've reduced death from cardiovascular disease, I believe, over 60%.
Oh, wow.
Which is amazing, right? We've reduced cancer deaths, not as quickly, but we've made progress. Guess what the death rate for hip fracture is unchanged in 50 years. It's basically unchanged. 1 year mortality, all-cause mortality, depending on, which study you look at or which population, it's, 20 to 30%. And half of patients who survive lose independence, right? And then the fracture rate, so there's the death rate from fracture, right? Unchanged. Mm-hmm. But the fracture rate itself, it had been going down. I think it went down, something like 10 or 15% when the medications were, Fosamax was first released. But the utilization of the medicines has gone down because of concerns over side effects, which, frankly, may be overblown. I'm personally not anti-medication. I think we want, a multimodal approach, different combinations of interventions at different stages of disease. But despite what I think, patients are not using them as kind of indicated per the guidelines. And so fracture rates have stopped declining. And by some numbers are going up. So this condition stands really in contrast with a lot of the progress we've made. And I know it's a difficult condition, but I also think we need to change our mindset around acceptance, right? I think I see comments from patients that, osteoporosis is a natural part of aging. Well, that's certainly true. And heart attacks are a natural part of aging, and cancer is a natural part of aging, right? And we don't accept those. Well, to a certain extent, we have to accept them, but we fight against them, right? I want our mindset to be that we fight against frailty and fracture. And, I don't want to just live long, and I do want to live long if possible, but I want to live actively and strong and be able to do things, right? And fractures really get in the way of that.
Yeah, it's this whole contrast between lifespan and health span. And we certainly want to be able to continue to live vibrant, healthy lives and continue to contribute to society, family, etc. So it should be, a pretty understood goal to afford this opportunity to women and men, because this is not just a problem for women, although to a larger extent, it's a problem for women.
Yeah, and it does affect women more. So remember that curve we looked at. So the male curve essentially it peaks higher. So men tend to have higher peak bone density. So when they lose it, they're losing from a higher place. Now, of course, that's an average. So men can have low bone density at a younger position. But when they fracture, they fare worse. So there's kind of a reverse discrimination. Men are not screened as much as they should be for osteoporosis. So they're underdiagnosed and they're undertreated, more so even than women. So now our FDA approval is for postmenopausal women. We started there, not because we don't care about men, but we are just trying to kind of Pareto work our way down that
Mm-hmm.
curve of where the biggest need is. And we are very concerned about and interested in, researching our device for men as well.
Right. So speaking of research, and then also people wanting that new breakthrough technology to address an old problem. So let's talk a little bit more about the specific technology, the space technology that is now being applied in real life through your device. Can you talk a little bit more about the science behind your device?
Yes. So there had been people postulating even hundreds of years ago that vibration could be therapeutic. So people notice things like riding in carriages over cobblestones, it gives you vibration, that sometimes it would make them feel better. So there had been concepts even before modern medicine that maybe vibration is helpful. And so research, began once we got into the modern age in animals, looking at a cellular level. How do bones, what triggers them to strengthen and grow? And it was known that it's mechanical stimulation. When you remove mechanical stimulation, when you remove any force on the bone, they lose bone density. Even if you look at an athlete, like the famous example is a tennis player, the dominant hand has thicker, stronger bones than the non-dominant hand because they're using it. So we know that bones, they're not static, they're not predetermined completely, right? So, your two arms would be the same, but if you're using one more, that bone gets denser. And so then the question was, well, we know that loss of bone density is such a serious issue. What can we do to essentially mimic, right, that mechanical stimulation of exercise and jumping and running? And so vibration essentially is a form of mechanical stimulation. And so then the research started in animals. They researched sheep and rats and saw that it improved bone density. So there's all this precursor science. And if you want to delve deep into that, one of the company founders, Michael Jasma, who's our chief scientific officer. He literally did his PhD in how bone cells respond to vibration and mechanical stimulation. So he's the go-to. So I know what I know from listening to him. So I'm sort of channeling him right here. And then, as we started to have astronauts being in space for a long time on the space station, this became a critical problem for NASA, and NASA funded research on the whole body vibration platforms. And so this is, actually on the space station, this image you're showing. And as I said, that research showed that it, it had a positive result, right? It improved bone density. And so then the next step was, okay, if it works in astronauts, we have such a big problem here on Earth with, older adults, and especially postmenopausal women, and bone density. And so the research has been replicated. And there have been many, many research projects on whole body vibration, different forms, different strengths, different durations. And, in the final analysis, it appears that, low frequency vibration, like 30 hertz or 33 hertz, and a certain amount of force with high frequency in the sense of frequency of utilization. So close to daily as possible is what works. And that last point of utilization is kind of the gotcha, right? And so we've seen the studies on whole body vibration have been inconsistent, right? There are good results out there. We see that, we saw that possibility, but what our founder and Dr. Jasmine observed was, we know the mechanism works. How do we make it so that it works consistently in the most patients? And that's how we got to the idea of the belt. And by the way, multiple form factors were tried, and this was sort of the win.
Okay.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to see space age technology on Earth today. Another great NASA a spin-off, spin-out, or benefit of space technology.
Right,
And speaking of
upside down writing pens, right? Pens and
I'm sorry, say it again.
the pens that write
yeah,
directional.
upside down. So no, we
Dehydrate.
joke about some of the moon landing benefits, but they're real in terms of so many innovations. Speaking of living in the future and futurism, I mean, what's next for you guys in terms of your roadmap or technology? Anything you're excited about that you can share? You must have a lot going on behind the scenes.
Sure. Top priority for us is, in a sense, is getting the current device out to patients. Now you may wonder, okay, well, you did the pivotal trial, you should have them. So the devices were very effective in the pivotal trial, but that was 126 patients. So we wanted to make some essentially improvements based on things we learned in the trial, and also put them in such a fashion that they would be easily manufacturable at scale. We were lucky to get a U.S. government grant for that. By the way, I want to mention we have gotten 3 NIH, National Institute of Aging grants. So I don't think for today if it weren't for that. So the government recognizes how big a problem this is, right? And Medicare is paying for all these fractures. So getting the scalable, improved belt on the market. The app I mentioned, we've built that, so that's pretty much done. We are going to integrate in this exercise program. So that's what the team is really focused on now. I talked about all the questions in the webinar. So the number one question was, what about osteoporosis? Our pivotal trial was with postmenopausal women with osteopenia. We focused on osteopenia because, frankly, those patients don't have as many treatment options, right? There's this very big unmet need. There's a lot of those patients. But we got a lot of questions about, what if I already have osteoporosis? And as a regulated class 2 device, the FDA is very specific. You can only claim what you research. So someone could hypothesize if it works for osteopenia, it could work for osteoporosis. The whole body vibration platforms have worked for osteoporosis in addition to osteopenia. They've worked for men. They've worked with patients with cerebral palsy. They've worked in a lot of situations, but they're not a regulated class 2 device. We are. And so next on our roadmap is where we want to do a pivotal trial so that we can know with confidence, how well it works, safety and efficacy for osteoporosis. Also for men, we have a lot of requests, and there's a big unmet need for patients who are on aromatase inhibitors. So women, breast cancer survivors, if they had HR positive breast cancer, they're typically put on medicines like letrozole, which really cause rapid bone loss. Men on androgen deprivation therapy for prostate cancer also typically have rapid bone loss. And, they are often given medications, but, the medications for osteoporosis, they reduce fracture risk quite a lot, 50% or, varies by medicine, but it's not 100%. So, we want to prevent even more fractures. So that's another area that we'd like to research, is combining the device with medication treatments. So there's a lot of work to do.
Indeed.
Very, very exciting. So in wrapping up, me being a woman of a certain age that is starting to really think about, the premenopause and menopause and all the consequences of that coming. So as a patient myself, and also as a patient advocate, how can I advise people? How can this be prescribed to them? Is that now available? Do you just ask your doctor?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to get a DEXA scan. So You know, as you're going through menopause, you want to really know, I believe, where your bone density is so that you can intervene early if appropriate. And, you know, over the last 15, 20 years, we've had a reduction in the use of HRT, or menopause hormone therapy, which is its own controversial topic that I will not weigh in on. But
okay,
the fact that we have used hormone therapy much less means that there's earlier bone loss in general. So more women need this in their 50s than was the case, you know, maybe 30 years ago. So first step is to get a DEXA and see where your bone health is. If you have osteopenia and this is, you know, appropriate, it will be very easy. So your doctor we have an online pharmacy who will be dispensing. It's a prescription product, so it will get dispensed by a pharmacy. And you can either have your doctor prescribe through the electronic medical record, through fax, through phone. And we will be also deploying a telehealth solution so patients can get a prescription also through telehealth. We will be launching a pre-order program in about a month. So what people should do if they're interested is come to our website, osteobooth.com or bonehealthtech.com, and sign up. There's a notification list, and that will, you know, get you in the know. You'll get invited to, if we do webinars, we'll be hosting a webinar for physicians, clinicians, probably in the next month. So we're doing that as well. We want to get the word out both to patients and to physicians.
Well, thank you for the incredible mission and the work you and the team are doing and sharing this important story. We always hate to see our family members, mothers, grandmothers, sisters suffering in this way. And so what an incredible advancement and opportunity for us all. Thanks for your time, Laura. Thanks for the work.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks everyone for listening, and look forward to our next episode as well. Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you.